So based on the definitions, we have this chart here, and I'll upload a video where I'm describing this a little bit better after you've read in the definitions and kind of gotten used to them for these vocab words. So any number that we can think of will always be complex. Okay, so this is basically a big box, and then it's broken down into little boxes or sections. So from this complex number, anything that I give you will always be considered complex, but from there you have to decide if it's considered an imaginary number or a real number. If I give you an example, which will be complex, because I said everything will always be complex, and you decide that it's imaginary rather than real, that means that this is where you stop. Okay, so whatever example would be complex and imaginary, that's it, because there's nothing inside here that you can go any further. Now let's say that I give you again an example, and obviously it has to be complex because everything is always complex, but this time instead of imaginary, it's actually a real number. That means you have to look in this next box right here. Okay, so then you would look at this next box here, and now you have two different categories. You have irrational or irrational. If you determine that from here the number you're working with is irrational, again, this is where you stop. This is your ending, which means that that example is now irrational, real, and complex. Okay, it cannot be imaginary, it cannot be rational. You have to kind of choose where to go. Now let's say that I give you an example. It's always complex, but from there, again, you're choosing real. But instead of being irrational, this time it's going to be an irrational example. Now, once you check to see if it's an irrational example, you would check to see, okay, is it also an integer? If it is, then you would keep going. Then you would check, is it also a whole number? Is it also a natural number? If you were to stop here, so let's say you said it is an integer, but it's not a whole or a natural, then that means the number that we're working with is an integer, rational, real, and complex. So right now it probably doesn't make that much sense, but I will be adding to this to kind of go over it with like a box method so you guys can understand this. Make sure you go over the examples of what a complex number, real number, irrational number, the rational, integer, and pure imaginary look like for your whole numbers, your natural numbers, all of that stuff. And then just write down these properties, and then we'll go over them when we get a chance.